My husband slapped me at our anniversary party. I said one word and walked out forever. The sound cracked across the ballroom before my brain even registered that my husband had struck me. 280 faces swiveled toward us. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. Champagne flutes froze halfway to people's lips. My cheeks stung so fiercely I could barely hear past the ringing in my ears. My husband Gerald didn't look embarrassed. He looked irritated. As I already said, he barked loud enough for the entire room, either apologize to my mother or leave. His mother stood beside him with one hand theatrically pressed against her mouth, though I could see the satisfaction glinting behind the performance of shock. Several relatives suddenly found their plates fascinating. Others didn't bother looking away at all. Some were smiling. One of Gerald's business associates actually chuckled into his glass. 26 years. 26 years of marriage had delivered me to this exact moment. I slowly raised my fingers to my cheek. I wasn't crying. Not yet. Instead, I looked around the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel in downtown Milwaukee, where Gerald had insisted on hosting our 26th wedding anniversary celebration. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Fresh white roses crowded every table. An enormous screen behind the dance floor cycled through photographs from our marriage. Vacations. Christmas mornings. Family reunions. Pictures that suddenly appeared to belong to complete strangers. Then I looked at my 3-year-old son Caleb. He stood beside our babysitter near the dessert table, clutching his little stuffed rabbit. His tiny brown eyes were enormous with confusion. He had witnessed everything. That hurt infinitely worse than the slap. I leaned down just enough for Gerald to hear me. "You didn't only humiliate me," I whispered. "You just taught our son that it's acceptable." Gerald rolled his eyes. "Oh, stop being so theatrical," his mother sniffed loudly. "See," she announced to the room. "She's always been like this. Always determined to ruin every family celebration." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the guests. That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just finished. I looked at my husband one final time. "Okay. One word. No shouting. No insults. No scene." I picked up my purse, crossed the ballroom, took Caleb's tiny hand and walked out. Nobody followed us. My name is Rebecca Lindstrom. I'm 53 years old. Until that night, I genuinely believed that enduring humiliation was simply part of holding a family together. I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, the oldest daughter of a school librarian and a firefighter. My parents weren't wealthy, but they taught my sisters and me something worth considerably more than money. Respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you gave. And if someone stopped giving it to you, you had every right to walk away. Somehow I forgot that lesson entirely after marrying Gerald. I met him when I was 27. I had just started teaching 3rd grade at a public elementary school outside Milwaukee. Gerald was charming, self-assured, funny. He came from one of those families everyone in town seemed to recognize. His father owned a thriving construction company. His mother, Eleanor, sat on every charity board, church committee, and country club roster worth mentioning. I knew I wasn't from their world, but Gerald assured me none of that mattered. "My mother will come around," he promised while we were dating. "She just needs time." He never did. The first time I visited their house, Eleanor examined the homemade pie I'd brought and smiled politely. "Oh," she said. "How quaint." At Thanksgiving she criticized my cooking. At Christmas she criticized my clothes. When Gerald and I bought a modest starter home instead of accepting one of his parents' investment properties, she called it adorably middle class. Gerald always brushed it aside. "That's just Mom." Every insult arrived wrapped in a joke. Every cruel remark was dismissed as merely her personality. And every time I felt wounded, I became the problem for taking it seriously. Years accumulated. Gerald eventually took over his father's construction business. His income climbed steadily. Mine didn't. I remained a public school teacher because I loved watching children learn to read. Eleanor called teaching a nice little hobby. Gerald never corrected her. Then life changed forever. 6 years ago, our 23-year-old daughter Sophie was killed by a drunk driver while driving home from graduate school. The grief nearly obliterated us. I honestly believed our marriage wouldn't survive it. 2 years later, after months of counseling and countless difficult conversations, we made the unexpected decision to adopt. That's how Caleb entered our lives. He had just turned 1. Small, quiet, terrified of raised voices. The first night he slept in our house, he refused to release my finger. From that moment forward, he became my son in every way that actually mattered. Eleanor never accepted him. She never said so directly. Instead, she asked questions. Do you know anything about his real family? Children inherit all sorts of problems. Blood has a way of revealing itself eventually. Every time she spoke that way, I would see Caleb playing nearby. Too young to comprehend. Old enough to feel unwelcome. Gerald would sigh. Mom doesn't mean anything by it. But she did. He always did. Which is precisely why I wasn't surprised when she insisted on planning our anniversary party herself. It's my gift to you, she'd said. Gerald loved the idea. I wasn't even consulted about what I might want. Eleanor selected the hotel, the menu, the flowers, the guest list. She even chose my dress, saying, "Trust me, dear. You clearly need assistance." I smiled through all of it exactly as I always had. Looking back now, I understand she had been rehearsing that night for years. Every small insult, every public embarrassment, every reminder that I would never truly belong in her family. The anniversary dinner began pleasantly enough. People toasted our marriage. Old friends shared stories. Then Eleanor stood to deliver her speech. She smiled sweetly at the microphone. "I'd like everyone to raise a glass," she began, "to my son, who has always deserved absolutely the very best." The room applauded. She looked directly at me. "And despite life occasionally handing us unexpected detours, he's managed to construct a wonderful life anyway." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then she laughed. "Let's be honest. We all know Gerald married for love, because it certainly wasn't for money or social standing." The ballroom erupted with awkward laughter. I glanced at Gerald. He was laughing too. Then Eleanor continued. "And isn't little Caleb adorable? Such a blessing. Though I suppose we can only pray he doesn't inherit whatever unfortunate traits came attached to his background." That was when I stood up. I rose so abruptly my chair scraped loudly across the ballroom floor. The laughter faded instantly. Eleanor's smile faltered for exactly 1 second before she recovered. "Oh," she said sweetly into the microphone. "Did I strike a nerve?" I looked directly at her. "No," I answered calmly. "You've been striking the same nerve for 26 years." The room went so quiet I could hear the ventilation system humming overhead. Eleanor lowered the microphone slightly. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. I wasn't shouting. I didn't need to. I've spent half my life pretending your comments were jokes. They weren't. They were insults. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner. You made absolutely certain I understood I would never be good enough." A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Gerald stepped beside his mother. "Rebecca," he warned. I ignored him. "You've mocked my career. You've mocked my family. You've mocked our son." Eleanor gasped theatrically. "I have done no such thing." I looked around the ballroom. Has anyone here ever heard Eleanor say one kind thing about Caleb? Nobody answered. Not a single person. Silence can be louder than applause. Eleanor's cheeks flushed crimson. Gerald seized my arm. "That's enough." I gently pulled free. "No, Gerald. Not this time." Eleanor suddenly dabbed at imaginary tears. "I opened my heart to this girl 26 years ago." Someone actually murmured, "Poor Eleanor." I almost laughed out loud. Poor Eleanor. The woman who had spent decades systematically humiliating me. Gerald looked embarrassed. Not because of what his mother had done, but because I had finally stopped absorbing it. He leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You're making a fool of yourself." "No," I replied quietly. "I'm just refusing to let you make one out of me anymore." That's when he slapped me. Everything afterward unfolded exactly the way I remembered it. The command. The ultimatum. The silence. My single word. And then Caleb and I walked out. The drive home felt strangely peaceful. Caleb sat quietly in his car seat hugging his stuffed rabbit. Normally he chattered without pause. That night he didn't say a word. Halfway home, a tiny voice finally broke the silence. "Mommy." "Yes, sweetheart. Did Daddy hit you because you were bad?" My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Every mother has moments she never forgets. That question became one of mine. I pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot, shut off the engine and climbed into the back seat beside him. No, baby. Never. Then why? I swallowed hard. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices. He studied my face carefully. My teacher says we're not supposed to hit. Your teacher is right. He touched my cheek with his tiny hand. Does it hurt? A little. He kissed the red mark. There. I broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I simply wrapped my arms around my little boy and cried against his shoulder while he patted my back the same way I had comforted him after nightmares. In that moment I understood something with absolute clarity. If I stayed, one day Caleb might come to believe that love and fear belong together. I would never allow that. It was nearly midnight when we reached our house. Gerald wasn't home. I wasn't surprised. He was probably still entertaining guests, pretending nothing significant had occurred. I carried Caleb upstairs, read him his favorite story and waited until he fell asleep. Then I walked into our bedroom. 26 years of memories surrounded me. Wedding photographs. Anniversary cards. Family vacations. For years I had believed those objects represented a happy marriage. Now they looked like evidence collected from someone else's life. I opened the closet and pulled out 2 suitcases. Not 4. Not 10. Just 2. One for Caleb. One for me. I packed only what genuinely mattered. Clothes. Important documents. Birth certificates. Adoption papers. Medical records. Family photographs. Caleb's favorite blanket. His stuffed rabbit. Nothing else. The expensive furniture stayed. The jewelry Gerald had purchased over the years stayed. The china Eleanor had insisted we register for stayed. Things were merely things. Peace was priceless. Around 2 in the morning I called the only person I knew would answer. My mother. She picked up on the second ring. Rebecca. The instant she heard my voice she knew. What happened? I tried to speak. Said I cried. She waited patiently. When I finally managed to explain everything there was a long silence. Then she said something I hadn't heard in years. Come home. I'm 53, Mom. I know. I have a child. I know. I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. I don't need you to know, she said gently. I just need you to come home. For the first time that night I felt safe. At 6 the next morning I called my school principal. I explained that I needed emergency leave. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply said, take care of yourself. Your classroom will be here whenever you're ready. Then I called an attorney a friend had recommended years earlier. By 8:30 I was sitting in his office. His name was Curtis Halloway. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished he folded his hands. The question, he said, isn't whether you can leave. It's whether you're ready to. I already have. He nodded. Good. Then he asked, where will you go? I smiled for the first time since the anniversary party. Savannah. My mother retired there 6 years ago. He leaned back. Fresh start. No. A peaceful one. By noon, Caleb and I were at Mitchell International Airport. He thought we were embarking on an adventure. In many ways we were. As I fastened his seatbelt on the plane, my phone vibrated for the first time all morning. Gerald. Missed call. Another. Then a text. Where are you? I stared at the screen. A second message appeared. Stop acting childish and come home. I locked the phone without replying. A flight attendant smiled warmly as she passed. First trip together? I looked at Caleb who was gazing excitedly out the window. First day of our new life, I answered softly. As the plane lifted above Milwaukee I didn't look back. Hours later, Gerald unlocked the front door expecting another argument. Instead he found an empty closet. 2 missing suitcases. Caleb's room stripped of everything that mattered. On the kitchen counter sat only my wedding ring. Beside it, a single folded sheet of paper. The note contained 3 sentences. Gerald, you told me to get out. I finally listened. Nothing more. No accusations. No insults. No threats. Just the truth. Gerald called me 26 times before our plane landed in Savannah. I didn't answer. He left 7 voicemails. The first sounded irritated. Rebecca, enough of this. Caleb probably needs his nap. Call me. The second sounded impatient. You've made your point. Come home. By the fifth message, his confidence had begun fracturing. Rebecca, where are you? The final voicemail was different. Quiet. Almost uncertain. Please, just tell me Caleb is okay. I deleted every message without listening to them a second time. Not because I hated Gerald. Because I finally understood that peace sometimes begins with silence. Savannah greeted us with warm sunshine and salt-thick air. My mother, Doreen, was waiting outside baggage claim. The moment she spotted Caleb running toward her, she dropped her purse and opened both arms. My goodness. She laughed through tears. You've gotten so big. Caleb hugged her tightly. I came on an airplane. I heard, she smiled. Then she looked at me. One glance at my swollen cheek told her everything. She didn't ask a single question. She simply wrapped me in the kind of embrace only a mother can give. The kind that says you're safe now. For the first time in years I believed it. Back in Milwaukee, Gerald's confidence didn't survive long. At first he assumed I would cool off. He even told Eleanor during breakfast the next morning, she always comes back. Eleanor buttered her toast. Of course she will. She has nowhere else to go. Neither of them knew I was already unpacking Caleb's clothes 800 miles away. By Monday afternoon, Gerald finally called my school. The principal declined to tell him anything beyond the fact that I had requested emergency leave. He drove to my closest friend Priya's house. She answered the door with folded arms. Where's Rebecca? Priya looked him directly in the eye. If she wanted you to know, she'd have told you. The door closed. Gerald wasn't accustomed to doors closing in his face. Meanwhile, Curtis Halloway filed the first legal documents exactly as promised. He also advised me to preserve every voicemail, every text message, every email Gerald sent. Don't argue with him, Curtis said during a video call. Don't defend yourself. What if he insults me? He probably will. What if he apologizes? Wait until his actions match his words. It was the calmest legal advice I had ever received. 3 days after the anniversary party, something unexpected occurred. One of Gerald's younger cousins uploaded a short video from the ballroom. Not the slap. Everything preceding it. Eleanor mocking my teaching career. Eleanor joking about Caleb's background. Guests laughing awkwardly. My face. Gerald saying absolutely nothing. The video lasted barely 2 minutes, but it traveled rapidly through family group chats. Someone forwarded it to church members. Another person posted it in a local community group before deleting it a few hours later. By then, far too many people had already seen it. The comments weren't what Eleanor anticipated. Instead of sympathizing with her, people asked why anyone would speak to their daughter-in-law that way. Another wrote that the little boy had been standing right there watching. Someone recognized Gerald. One comment collected hundreds of reactions. Silence is agreement. The husband was equally guilty. Gerald read every single word. For the first time he watched that video through someone else's eyes. He didn't look like a successful businessman. He looked like a man who had abandoned his wife in public. His office noticed the shift almost immediately. Gerald owned a respected regional construction company his father had spent 40 years building. Reputation mattered enormously. One longtime client postponed signing a contract. Another asked to wait until things settled down. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to make Gerald deeply uneasy. He complained to Eleanor. This is absurd. She dismissed him with a wave. People adore gossip. They'll forget. But they didn't. A week later, I received an email from the superintendent's office in Savannah. One of the district's literacy coordinators was retiring unexpectedly. My mother had quietly mentioned my background to a former colleague. The position wasn't guaranteed, but they wanted to interview me. I almost laughed. For years, Eleanor had mocked my career. Now the very career she considered insignificant might become the foundation of my entirely new life. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. We discussed reading programs, teacher mentoring children from difficult backgrounds. I noticed something remarkable. Nobody asked how much money my husband earned. Nobody cared about my last name. They cared exclusively about my work. 2 days later they offered me the position. When I signed that contract, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride. Not because the salary impressed anyone. Because I had earned it entirely myself. Gerald eventually hired a private investigator. Not because he believed Caleb and I were in danger. Because he genuinely couldn't locate us. The investigator's report arrived 12 days after I left. Gerald opened the envelope expecting a hotel receipt. Instead, he found my new mailing address in Savannah. Confirmation that Caleb had been enrolled in preschool. Confirmation that I had accepted a new position with the school district. And one final sentence. Mrs. Lindstrom appears to have permanently relocated. Gerald stared at those words for a very long time. Permanently. Until then, he had believed this was temporary. A punishment. A dramatic gesture. Instead, he realized I had been constructing an entirely new life while he had been waiting for me to return. Eleanor walked into his office. Did they find her? Gerald nodded slowly. She's gone. Eleanor shrugged. So? He looked up at his mother. No. His voice barely rose above a whisper. You don't understand. I didn't lose an argument. I lost my family. For the first time since I had walked out of that ballroom, Eleanor had no clever response. The first letter arrived nearly 4 months after Caleb and I relocated to Savannah. It wasn't from Gerald. It wasn't from Eleanor. It came from one of the women who had attended our anniversary party. Her name was Charlotte. We had never been close. She and her husband had known Gerald's family through church for years. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note. Rebecca, I've wanted to reach out ever since that night, but I didn't know whether it would make things worse. I owe you an apology. I laughed when Eleanor made those comments. Not because I thought they were funny, but because everyone else was laughing. I should have stood up for you. I'm ashamed that I didn't. I hope you found peace. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my desk drawer. It didn't erase what had happened, but it reminded me of something important. Sometimes people don't participate in cruelty because they're cruel. Sometimes they simply lack the courage to stand apart from a crowd. Unfortunately, the pain they inflict is identical. Life in Savannah gradually became predictable. For the first time in years, predictable felt wonderful. Every morning Caleb and I walked to his preschool before I drove to the district office. He loved waving goodbye at the classroom door. Love you, Mommy. I love you more. No. I love you the most. It became our private ritual. My co-workers welcomed me with kindness rather than judgment. Nobody cared that I drove a used SUV. Nobody asked where my clothes came from. Nobody compared me to anyone else. People simply valued hard work. Within 3 months, I was helping schools launch a literacy program for struggling readers across the entire district. Every afternoon I came home exhausted but proud. It had been years since I felt that way. Gerald, meanwhile, was discovering that money couldn't resolve everything. The business remained profitable, but something fundamental had shifted. Several longtime employees had quietly watched the anniversary video after it circulated among friends. One afternoon, Gerald overheard 2 foremen talking in the break room. I'd have walked out too. So would my wife. They fell silent the instant Gerald entered. Nobody confronted him. Nobody accused him. But respect, once forfeited, rarely returns overnight. Eleanor refused to accept reality. Every Sunday after church, she told anyone willing to listen that I had kidnapped Caleb. Gerald corrected her more than once. He's our son, Mom. She had every legal right to take him. Eleanor would shake her head. You always defend her. Gerald never answered. Perhaps because for the first time in 26 years, he recognized he hadn't defended me at all. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Gerald did something he had avoided for months. He watched the complete anniversary video. Not the brief clip that had spread online. The entire recording. For nearly 45 minutes he watched his mother deliver one cutting remark after another. He watched guests laugh nervously. He watched me smile politely every single time. Then he noticed something he had never seen before. Every time Eleanor insulted me, I looked at him. Just for a second. Waiting. Hoping. Expecting him to say something. He never did. When the slap finally arrived, Gerald paused the video. He stared at the frozen image of his own hand against my face. Then he rewound it. Later he would tell his counselor there wasn't one single moment that haunted him. It was the hundreds of small moments preceding it. The moments when he chose comfort over courage. Yes, counseling. Not because he believed it would salvage our marriage. By then he understood that ship had sailed permanently. He went because he could no longer recognize the man he had become. His counselor asked him a question during their 3rd session. When did you first begin placing your mother's approval above your wife's well-being? Gerald couldn't answer. Not because he didn't know. Because he realized it had started before we were even married. One afternoon, Curtis Holloway called me. There's something you should know. What is it? Gerald has agreed to every temporary custody arrangement we've proposed. I frowned. No argument? None. He's also accepted the financial disclosures without objection. That genuinely surprised me. Gerald had always despised losing. Curtis hesitated before continuing. His attorney mentioned something else. What? He wants to apologize. I looked out the window. Children were playing on the school playground across the street. I don't think I'm ready. You don't have to be. And if you never are, that's your choice too. I appreciated that answer enormously. For years, everyone had instructed me on what I should do. Stay quiet. Keep the peace. Forgive. Smile. Move on. Curtis was the first person who reminded me I was allowed to choose. Another month passed. Autumn arrived. The oak trees throughout my mother's neighborhood turned brilliant shades of gold and rust. One Saturday morning, Caleb and I were building a birdhouse in the backyard when my phone buzzed. A text. Not from Gerald. This is Marcus, Gerald's younger brother. I know we haven't spoken in years. I just wanted you to know you were right. We all should have stopped her. I'm sorry. I smiled sadly. Marcus had always been quieter than Gerald. Kinder too. He simply hadn't spoken up. Neither had anyone else. I replied with 4 words. Thank you for saying that. Nothing more was required. A week later, Curtis called again. This time he said gently, Gerald isn't asking for reconciliation. What is he asking for? He'll be in Savannah next Friday for business. He wants 30 minutes. No lawyers. No pressure. No expectations. He only wants to apologize face to face. I closed my eyes. For months I had imagined this moment. I had pictured myself shouting, demanding answers, making him feel the identical humiliation I had endured. Instead I felt strangely calm. Maybe revenge wasn't watching someone suffer. Maybe revenge was discovering you no longer needed it. I looked across the yard. Caleb was laughing as he painted the little wooden birdhouse bright blue. For the first time in years, our future felt larger than our past. I took a slow breath. Then I answered, tell him 30 minutes. The following Friday was cool and luminous. One of those perfect Savannah mornings when the breeze carries salt water through the oak trees. I chose a small park overlooking the river. Nothing fancy. A few wooden benches, children feeding ducks, retirees walking their dogs. A peaceful place, exactly what I wanted. My mother offered to watch Caleb while I met Gerald. As I kissed Caleb goodbye, he looked up at me. Are you coming back? I smiled. Always. He nodded and hugged my leg. Okay. That single word reminded me of another one I had spoken 4 months earlier while walking out of that ballroom. Only this time it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. Gerald was already waiting when I arrived. I almost didn't recognize him. He looked thinner, older. Not because of gray hair. Because regret ages people in ways time cannot. He stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. I sat across from him. You have 30 minutes. He nodded. I know. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally Gerald reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table between us. My wedding ring. I found it after you left. I've carried it ever since. I looked at it but made no move to pick it up. I thought you should have it. I don't, I replied softly. It stopped being mine the night I left. He slowly withdrew his hand. I understand. For the first time in 26 years he actually did. I've replayed that night 1,000 times, he said. I kept telling myself the slap was the greatest mistake of my life. He shook his head. It wasn't. I looked at him. The greatest mistake was every single time my mother insulted you and I laughed. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every family dinner. I kept asking you to keep the peace. His voice cracked. But what I was actually asking was for you to keep accepting disrespect. I didn't interrupt. He deserved to say it out loud. I failed you, he continued. I failed Sophie while she was alive. I failed Caleb. And I failed myself. His eyes filled. I became exactly the kind of man I swore I'd never become. For a long moment, all I heard was water lapping against the dock. Then I finally spoke. I waited 26 years for you to defend me. I know. I looked at you every single time she humiliated me. I know. I kept thinking this time he'll say something. Gerald lowered his head. I'm sorry. I know they're only words. But they're true. A young couple walked past pushing a stroller. The father reached over and tucked a blanket around the baby without saying anything at all. Such a simple act. Such ordinary kindness. I wondered how many ordinary moments I had spent hoping for something equally simple. Not flowers. Not expensive vacations. Just respect. I've been seeing a counselor, Gerald said. Good. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I only wanted to tell you that you were right to leave. I studied his face carefully. Months earlier I would have searched for excuses, manipulation, blame. I found none. Only sorrow. Genuine sorrow. I do forgive you, I said. His head lifted in surprise. You do. I forgive you because I refuse to carry this pain for the rest of my life. His shoulders relaxed. Then I added quietly, but forgiveness isn't the same as returning. The hope drained from his face. I figured. I've built a peaceful life. So have I, he admitted. Or at least I'm trying to. I hope you keep trying. I will. Before we stood to leave, Gerald asked one final question. Will I get to see Caleb? I smiled gently. He's your son. I would never keep him from a father willing to become the man he deserves. Gerald closed his eyes. Thank you. But understand something. If you ever make him feel the way you made me feel, you won't get another chance. He nodded immediately. You have my word. For the first time I believed him. Not because he said the right thing. Because he had finally learned to accept responsibility instead of manufacturing excuses. A month later another letter arrived. This one from Eleanor. Her handwriting trembled across the page. She admitted she had spent most of her life believing money and social status determined a person's worth. She confessed she had never truly accepted me because I reminded her too much of the modest life she had spent decades attempting to escape. Then came the sentence that surprised me most. I taught my son that loyalty to me mattered more than respect for his wife. I was wrong. She apologized. Not only for the anniversary. For 26 years. I folded the letter carefully. I didn't call her. I didn't write back immediately. Some apologies deserve acknowledgement. That doesn't mean every relationship should be restored. A few weeks later I mailed her a short note. I accept your apology. I truly hope you find peace. I have. It was enough. Over the following 2 years, Gerald became a dependable father. He flew down once a month. He attended Caleb's preschool graduation, his soccer games, his birthday parties. Never once did he ask me to come back. Eventually we learned how to be respectful co-parents. Nothing more. Nothing less. As for me, I continued working with schools across Georgia, helping struggling readers discover the pleasure of books. Every evening Caleb and I still read together before bed. One night after finishing his favorite story he looked at me and asked, Mommy? Yes. Why do you always tell me to be kind? I brushed the hair away from his forehead. Because kindness is strongest when it's shown to people who can't give you anything in return. He smiled. I want to be kind like you. I kissed his forehead. Then you're already becoming the man I hoped you'd be. Looking back now, I understand that leaving wasn't the bravest thing I ever did. The bravest thing was refusing to allow bitterness to define the rest of my life. Sometimes people ask whether I regret walking away from a 26-year marriage. My answer never changes. I didn't walk away from love. I walked away from disrespect. And once I did, I finally found my way home. If this story touched your heart, remember this. No relationship is worth sacrificing your dignity. Love should never require you to accept humiliation. And walking away from disrespect isn't weakness. It's courage. If you've ever had to choose peace over staying somewhere you weren't valued, I would love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that hope is always possible, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more journeys of resilience, healing, and second chances.